What makes a first boss? So you've gone through the tutorial, you've learned the basics of combat and movement, you've noped away from that scary optional mini-boss. Nope, nope, nope. And now, you're faced with the first boss of the game. So, what's the job of a first boss? A first boss usually acts as a gatekeeper between the tutorial and the rest of the game. It is a skill check to see whether you understand everything you've learned so far. This episode, we're looking at Momodora, Reverie Under the Moonlight's first boss, the arthropod demon, Edea. To start, I'd like to examine the stage. It's a linear stage with no noticeable terrain whatsoever. It's very simple and leaves a lot of room to maneuver. At the beginning, the only obstacle is the boss. This brings us to our first point. Give the player space. Your player just learned basic movement. They haven't mastered it yet, so remember to give them some room to maneuver. On to the meat of things, Edea's moveset. She has 4 attacks in total. She has a tail swing, she spews a poisonous cloud, and she spits a poison bomb. These first 3 attacks are telegraphed with a relatively long wind-up animation. Finally, there's a swipe which has a faster wind-up animation. From her moves, we learned that we should telegraph your boss's attacks. Specifically, have a long wind-up animation before attacks. When it comes to first bosses, they should be relatively easy. Having long wind-up animations help ease the boss difficulty. The wind-ups of every attack doesn't have to be long. For example, her swipe has a relatively short wind-up. But notice this, when you start the fight, you start a distance away from Edea. This increases the chances that she uses one of her attacks with the longer wind-up at the beginning. Try to incorporate systems like this when planning movesets for your first boss. If possible, try to incorporate multiple ways to dodge the same attack. For example, Edea's swipe can be ducked under or rolled away from. Her poison bomb can be dodged by running away or hugging her. Giving players options encourages the player to find ways to use the combat and movement skills they learned previously. Having options leads into the next point. Enforce variety in combat. For example, all of her attacks can be dodged by backing away to a safe distance, which will probably be the strategy most new players choose. However, since Edea acts as a wall, as she moves closer, the amount of space the player has becomes smaller. This limited space is further enforced by periodical poison clouds on the edge of the stage. This all causes the player to have to employ the options we stated earlier. Finally, I'd like to talk about weak spots. If you're going to have a weak spot on your boss, make it noticeable but hard to reach. In the case of Edea, her weak point is the orb on the end of her tail. Most of the time it is tucked away behind her, but it is very noticeable. The orb is only vulnerable during her tail swing attack. The only way to hit it is to risk getting hit by the tail swing, which deals massive damage. This high risk, high reward sort of weak spot elevates the mechanic to a higher level than just another video game cliche. Overall, I believe Edea is a great first boss. She has a good moveset which enforces the mechanics that were introduced at the beginning of the game. She's also not a difficult boss, but perfectly sets the tone for future bosses. Tell me what you think though. Do you believe Edea is a good first boss? What other features of first bosses do you think make them good? Please, I'd love to hear more about your thoughts, and maybe start a discussion in the comments below.